as I mentioned in my Metal Gear Solid video, growing up, I was a Nintendo kid, so I'm not going to rehash everything I said there, but in case you haven't watched that, I took part in a lot of Nintendo games and kind of missed the boat on a lot of late 90s, early 2000s games that shaped legacies and the industry down the line that a lot of people played during that period of time. One of those series was Resident Evil, and for other series that I sort of missed the boat on, I would go back and play them, the obvious one being Metal Gear Solid, because it's very clearly something that's up my alley. And what I mean by that is, I know not everyone's like this, but I am a story over gameplay person. I do love gameplay. Specifically, I love when story integrates with gameplay. That's one of my favorite things about games. But in terms of valuing video games, I'd say the story definitely takes precedence more over the gameplay. It's kind of like a 70-30 split, if you want to put it that way. I definitely value gameplay, but I can love a great story with bad gameplay or mediocre gameplay. I can't really do it the other way around most of the time. There are some exceptions, but most of the time. Anyways, so that is my sort of taste. Metal Gear Solid, there's a big gameplay focus, but the narrative is, in my opinion at least, at the forefront. So lots of people assumed that going back and playing Metal Gear Solid would be for me. It'll be up my alley. It would be an easy transition, I guess. Not so, not the case with the Resident Evil series, because I think it's fair to say that these games are more so focused on gameplay and the survival horror aspect and the action and the combat than the story. They're more gameplay focused. I think that's just the truth. That's just how it is. So because of that, and because a lot of people agree with that, they said that going back to Resident Evil wouldn't really be a good idea for me because they're not my sort of games. And, yeah, if you look at my favorite games on Backlogged, if you go on there, you can see Final Fantasy XIV, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Yakuza, many Yakuza games, Xenoblade Chronicles, Final Fantasy IX, Cyberpunk, Witcher 3, Metal Gear Solid 3, Metal Gear Solid 2, Twilight Princess. There are lots of games where the narrative is front and center in a lot of ways, in varying ways, but that's the case. Chrono Trigger. Resident Evil is different from a lot of those games in that the narrative isn't an afterthought, but it's definitely not the primary focus, in my opinion. But I decided once I finished the Yakuza series on stream, a really fun sort of challenge for myself, or a great thing to do, would be to jump into Resident Evil and see why these games are so loved, even if it's not totally up my alley, just to sort of open up to it and be open to a series that doesn't really play exactly to my tastes, to be open to that, and sort of explore it and see why people love these games so much. And so I did so. I have played, in the last couple months, I played the first 4 Resident Evil games. Now, they're all remakes. I played Resident Evil 1 Remake, 2 Remake, 3 Remake, and I know that one, people say it's much truncated, so I get that, and 4 Remake. And I know there are diehard fans of the originals that really recommend going back and playing the originals, and I plan to. At least for 2, 3, and 4, I very much plan to. Maybe on stream, maybe not, I don't know that exactly yet, but I very much plan to play those games and go back and play them, just not at the moment. But yeah, I figured I'd make this video as a sort of TLDR about my experience with the Resident Evil games. Again, as is the case with every game I stream, the VODs are available on my VOD channel. You can check them out if you'd like. They're so much fun. But yeah, it was lots of fun to sort of understand what this series' DNA was. The puzzle-solving aspect of it. It's kind of similar. I am familiar with Silent Hill. I played the first 4 games, the Silent Hill 2 remake. I am familiar with Silent Hill, and I knew that they shared some aspects to it. It's kind of hard to think of one without thinking of the other. So some of the puzzle progression was kind of similar to Silent Hill, but also very different in some ways. And the survival horror element of it, getting into the first game, and the way it recontextualizes things. For example, you get used to the mansion, and then you go out and you come back, and then suddenly there are the Scarlet Heads, or whatever they're called. And then suddenly there are those monsters that can one-shot you, and every new corner, just when you've gotten used to the mansion, every new corner, there's a new element of fear to it. You're scared, whereas you had just gotten used to it, but now you're scared. It's just, the gameplay progression and gameplay loop is sublimely done. It's really well done. I guess we're just getting right into it. So Resident Evil 1, playing it was a real joy. I finished it in a couple of streams. It's not very long. These games aren't very long. But it was so cool to see where all these, where the legend had started, how this iconic series started its roots. And a lot of the ways to progress were lots of fun. A lot of the scenes were lots of fun. This series just has this amazingly cheesy, corny campiness to it that is so for me. The characters being oddly voiced, the characters saying strange things, Wesker premature, Barry talking about how acid shells make the zombies spittle, and I don't know, Jill Sandwich, like the cheese and the campiness in the dialogue, I love it, man. I love that stuff. So that was super for me. Even if the character work isn't really much to speak of. The character interactions were tons of fun. To be rewarded with a crazy Jill Barry scene, some insane dialogue after an hour of progressing. So yeah, but in terms of the game overall, it was a joy. I really loved it. I thought it was great. That charm, the general gameplay, the gameplay loop as well, but also the background art is beautiful. It's one of the best games I've ever played in terms of background art, right up there with Final Fantasy IX, in terms of just beautifully rendered background art to explore in. I love it. I think it's a relic of a bygone era that has unfortunately kind of been phased out, but I would love games to return back to background art like that. I know some do it, but en masse, I would love for there to be an uptick in that sort of thing, because I don't think we ever had to move past it, really. Obviously, the evolution into 3D environments and games and stuff like that has opened up the pathway to a great format of video game presentation, and I wouldn't want that to stop, of course. A lot of my favorite games are like that. Most of my favorite games are like that, I think. But we don't have to get rid of this sort of beautiful background art. We can go back to it for games that for which it could apply. Anyways, I digress. It's beautifully presented. The gameplay loop is tons of fun, really addicting. The progression is great. Some of the stories, even though the story isn't the focus in these games, the little notes and the things you get about the lore, and for example, Lisa in this game is very chilling. It's a very sad, chilling story. It just supplements the experience and implements and it elevates the immersion, and it makes it a great cohesive experience. Resident Evil 2, my god, what fun that game is. Leon, I immediately love Leon for how corny and cheesy he is. Claire's great too. They really play into the corniness and campiness of classic horror movie tropes in this remake. But the presentation is beautiful. It looks great. It's a totally different method of presentation. Like I said, games evolved. But I love that Resident Evil, you can play Resident Evil 1 Remake and then go to Resident Evil 2 Remake, and they're two equally beautiful methods of presentation from total different ends of the spectrum. It's a great game, and it was my favorite of the first three, actually, at the point I played it, and even after I played 3. And Leon is just so engaging as a character. Like I said, incredibly cheesy, incredibly campy, but also full of immense hope and heart. In spite of how awful this world proves itself to be time and time again, he always finds it within himself to hope. He never wants to give up. And that is something within him that as he evolves into 4, he keeps as his core. I want things to be different. And the establishment is great. The establishment is so good. The voice direction's amazing. A lot of the character work is really good. As you shift perspectives, the two routes being very different was really good. I love the gunplay. I love the police station. It's so much fun. Irons is delightfully hateable and awful. And the one thing that makes this game as great as it is for me is the unrelenting force of nature that is Mr. X. This guy, you hear his footsteps, sheer panic. The first time you see him, I screamed. I screamed throughout this game multiple times. It is just great tension, great anxiety. You're always on edge. And then if you need a break, just go into a safe room, you know? And then it coalesces with the final fight against Mr. X at the end. It's beautiful stuff, man. It's so well done. Mr. X is one of the series' greatest triumphs. So yeah, Resident Evil 2 Remake was awesome. I had so much fun with it. And then Resident Evil 3, you know, the things I heard about it is that it's like this disgrace. And I'm sure that playing it without having played the original definitely opens me up to being less critical of it, because of, I'm sure, like, I've heard it cuts a lot of stuff. But I had a really fun time with it. It's a thrilling romp. I think it's kind of intended to play in one sitting, the way it is. I did it in one stream, and I think it expands upon Jill's character really well. I gotta shout out my mod Trish for giving me a really cool interpretation of Nemesis being this accumulating trauma for Jill that she can't really escape, and the gratification you feel upon finally destroying him in the end is simultaneously gratification for for Jill being able to overcome her trauma. And I really buy into that interpretation. It's really sort of subtextual and abstract, but I like it a lot. And it's generally fun. It's not as deep as the other two games in terms of gameplay at all. It's not as varied, and it does get a bit stale in points, and it definitely has a lower ceiling. But I found it to be a fun romp, and I really like the way it sort of contextualizes certain things that happened in 2 at the same time, as an accompaniment. I really liked that aspect to it, and it was lots of fun. I had a good time with it. It's my least favorite of the 4 I played, but I definitely don't have a negative memory of it, and I think it's a net positive for sure. And then Resident Evil 4, it's my favorite one. It's just a bit more consistently. It's just a thrill ride, man. It's got a bit more consistency, I think, in the engagement from moment to moment on Resident Evil 2. Like, there is never a moment where you're not enraptured in this game. The environments, the atmosphere, the really spooky sort of pagan worship village feel that's established here is really, really great from the outset. The 3 distinct areas, all being variable in terms of gameplay, but consistent at the same time. The upgrade system, the gunplay, it's so much fun. The boss fights are amazing spectacle, including my favorite boss fight in the series against Krauser, who just plays this amazingly rich dynamic with Leon for being the sort of ideological flip side, the cynical man who was unable to hope in the way that Leon was, and then Leon who, despite the progression, despite all the pain he's experienced in the recent years, and what he experienced back in Resident Evil 2, will not stop hoping, always hopes that it's going to be different. We have Ashley, who is amazing. She's adorable. Her chemistry with Leon is great. She goes through her own little arc in this. The lore and tidbits that we get throughout are really, really great and help make this the most, I guess, rich game for me in terms of the way the setting is used as part of the storytelling. And then Wesker appears. Wesker's one of my favorite characters in the series, and he appears right at the end. Amazing stuff. Ada being in and out is really cool. And Luis is a great character with this, I don't want to say it's a classical mask, but a definite exaggeration that he wears to sort of play the charming rogue while also being the charming rogue, but also having this immense hope and atonement. Yeah, Luis is a great character, and all in all, just the character work is improved upon. The visuals are improved upon. It looks gorgeous. The atmosphere, just everything is just magnificent. And while it doesn't have the sort of spook factor or the scare factor of a Mr. X, and it's a bit more action focused than, I guess, horror focused, nonetheless, it is a consistently amazing experience, and it's my favorite game out of the 4 I've played. I do intend to play the rest of the series. I'm just taking a little break from it now. I don't want to really burn out. I've heard that Code Veronica is worth playing, but I think I'm probably going to hold out hope for a remake on that one. But I have 5 and 6 and 7 and 8. 5 and 6 I might do co-op mode or do something along those lines, so I might skip them for the next game I play, and I might start with Resident Evil 7 Biohazard, I believe it's called. I don't know exactly how I'm going to do it. There are a lot of ways I could approach it, but nonetheless, those are the games I play right now. I don't intend to play Resident Evil for a little bit. I'm going to take a little bit of a break from the series, but I will revisit it in the future, and I can't wait to. It's been so fun branching out and doing something a bit different and discovering this series and discovering how much I can be immersed in and enjoy a game series that isn't really tailored to my tastes has been really fun. And I hope if you've been partaking in the streams, you've enjoyed it as well. And I just wanted to put this out as sort of a, I guess, a sort of summary of my experience so far. Yeah, it's a great series, and I totally get all the hype. And Leon is a great character. He's my favorite in the series. But it's given me so many fun stream moments. It's been one of the most fun series to stream. And yeah, I'll be continuing to progress through it. And I can't wait for it. Anyways, thank you very much for watching, and have a good one. We'll see you in the next one. Feel free to share your thoughts on the series in the comments if you'd like to.